The Dragonback series by Timothy Zahn. Book 3, Dragon and Slave. Chapter 19. The kitchen was deserted when Jack and Dracos arrived. Deserted and dark both, with only a handful of small nightlights showing.
"The food supplies will be back in the pantry,"
Dracos pointed out as Jack wove his way carefully through the maze of shadows. I was kidding about being hungry, Jack told him. His stomach growled. Well, mostly anyway. He stopped beside the recipe desk and the corner-mounted recorder he'd seen on his first trip through the place. This is why we're here, he said, pulling the recorder from its attachment.
"What is it?"
Dracos asked. A recorder, Jack said, turning it toward one of the lights for a better look. Video and audio both. I figure there's no reason to let that camera in Gazen's office go to waste. He glanced around, looking for tools. A butter knife and seafood fork would probably do, he decided. Watch the door, he ordered Dracos, heading for the stack of silverware drawers. Let me know if you hear any movement over by the slave stairs. There was a surge of weight on his shoulders as the dragon leapt out from the back of his shirt collar. Silently, he padded off toward the door. The recorder was a simple, off-the-shelf model with few complications and not a single shred of security. It took Jack only a minute to take off the outer casing, strip the guts out of the gadget, and put the casing back together. Reattaching the empty shell to the desk, he put the recorder equipment into his pocket and headed for the exit. Finished, he called softly. Dracos? He rounded a preparation island and stopped. There was the door straight ahead, a wide, dark shadow against the pale white kitchen walls. The dragon was nowhere to be seen. Dracos?
"Here!"
the other called from somewhere to Jack's left.
"Come and see!"
Frowning, Jack followed the voice. Behind a large food warmer, he found Draco standing against the wall. Above his head was a wide, flat gray box set into the wall at Brumga eye level. Trouble? Jack asked.
"Just the opposite,"
Draco said.
"I was scouting and found the box you see above me. Do the words on it say what I believe they say?"
Jack stepped close and squinted at the box. In the dim light, the lettering was hard to make out. Spare something, he said. Spare
keys,"
Draco suggested. Jack felt his heartbeat pick up slightly. Spare keys? This is definitely worth a look, he agreed. Pressing his back against the box, he held a hand out to Dracos. The dragon put a forepaw on it and melted up his sleeve. There was the usual shifting on his skin as he leaned out over the box door. And there it was again, the same odd sensation Jack had felt outside Gazen's office, as if the dragon were somehow slipping. Another wiggle and he was back.
"There are 6 rows of hooks inside, with 5 on each row,"
he reported.
"Each hook is labeled and holds 1 to 3 keys."
Any alarms?
"None that I can see,"
Dracos told him. Jack looked at the side of the box, noted the simple-looking lock that held the lid in place. This seemed way too good to be true. I guess they figured hiding it back here was enough, he said. Could you see the labels?
"Not well enough to read,"
Draco said. Well, keys are always worth checking out, Jack said, pulling out his lockpick. Let's get this thing open. He had the lock popped in 10 seconds flat. Even with the out-of-the-way location, he thought dryly, whoever had been in charge of extra keys must not have read the Chakuk family security manual. Taking half a step back, he swung back the door and was slammed suddenly and violently backward as Dracos leapt out between him and the box. He flailed for balance, but the shove had been too hard. Gurgling helplessly in his throat, he fell back onto the tile floor.
"Dracos, stay down!"
the dragon said sharply. He was crouched beneath the box, his long neck twisted as he peered cautiously up at it.
"I heard a spring twitch as you opened the door, and then a click. A trap may have been activated."
Oh, great, Jack muttered. Keeping low to the floor, he skidded around to the wall beside the box. Then gingerly he eased himself upward. One look was all it took. There was a trap, all right, he said, but it's already been sprung. Have a look. Carefully, Draco straightened up.
There,
he said, his tongue flicking out to point at the huge hinge side of the box lid.
There is the spring I heard.
That's the trigger, Jack agreed. And there's the trap, that little hole between the first and second row of keys. See it?
Yes,
Draco said.
I assumed it was merely a defect in the material.
It's supposed to look that way, Jack said. It's the lens of a security camera set to go off as the door is opened. One of us just got his picture taken. Dracos muttered something evil sounding under his breath.
My fault.
Don't blame yourself, Jack told him, peering at the disguised lens. Probably a remote camera, with a light pipe system carrying the image through the wall to somewhere else. That kind of trigger is hard to detect, especially when you're looking at it with the box closed the way Kada do.
It is still a disaster,
Draco said in a low, pain-filled voice.
I have failed.
Let's not panic yet, okay? Jack said. You said you heard the click when the camera went off. When was that exactly?
It closely followed the sound of the spring,
Draco said slowly.
I believe I had already gone back to my three-dimensional form, hoping to protect you from any deadly weapon.
And to take the full impact of that weapon on himself? Probably. Typical Kada warrior thinking. So you think you'd already come out when the camera fired?
Yes, I am certain,
the dragon answered.
I was between you and the box at the time.
Wedged in rather tightly between Jack and the box, too, as Jack remembered it. So you were pressed up against the box, he said, blocking most of the light. And with what? Your back to the camera?
Most likely my right shoulder,
Draco said.
I was twisting that direction, but did not yet have my back to the box.
So in other words, they haven't got a picture of Jack Morgan with his fingers in the candy dish, Jack concluded. All they've got is a close-up of a Kada scale pattern.
But surely they will not be able to identify it,
Draco said hopefully.
Not here. No one here has ever seen a Kada.
We're assuming that, yeah, Jack said grimly. Problem is, we don't know for sure. We do know what these guys supply Brungan mercenaries to whoever the Valaga are working with. What if they're just not suppliers, but also partners?
If so, they may show the picture to the Valaga,
Draco said.
You are right. We must destroy that picture.
If we can, Jack said, glancing over his shoulder at the kitchen door. They were running dangerously low on time. First things first, as long as we're here, let's take a look at these keys. The labels had, of course, been printed in Brumgan script, but someone had thoughtfully added handwritten translations in English and Daiskri, probably for the benefit of slaves for whom one of the Orion Arm's major trade languages was more familiar. And as Jack ran his eyes over the labels, he realized that the lack of security here wasn't nearly as big a mistake as he'd hoped. Most of the keys were to meat lockers or pastry storage areas, or even one to a freezer temperature control. If they'd tripped off the Valaga for this, they'd paid a heavy price for pretty cheap goods. Then he spotted a single, small, and oddly shaped key on one of the hooks in the bottom row. Looking almost like an afterthought, leaning down, he squinted at the label and smiled tightly. As Uncle Virgil used to say, at least until he had decided it was safe to swear in Jack's presence. Bingo, he murmured.
What?
Dracos asked. A key to the slave hot boxes, Jack told him, taking the key and dropping it into his pocket. And since it says hot boxes, plural, I'm guessing it opens all of them. That could be extremely useful.
They will notice the loss,
Dracos warned. Only if they look really closely, Jack said, shifting one of the spare keys onto the now empty hook. This ought to make it less obvious.
What about the camera?
We'd have to take the whole box off the wall to see where the optic line goes, Jack said, closing the door and relocking it. And then we'd have to trace it to the camera itself. We'll just have to hope no one bothers to check the pictures every day.
But if they do,
then we may be in trouble, Jack cut him off harshly. He didn't like this any more than Dracos did, but there wasn't a knitted, purled, or darned thing either of them could do about it. At least, not right now. Or not. I doubt there are any Valaga here in the house. You'd probably have smelled them if there were. And a close-up view of Kada's scales isn't going to be very helpful to anyone else.
Perhaps,
Draco said reluctantly.
What now?
We go back to Gazen's office, he told Dracos, heading for the door again, and hope he's not getting up extra early this morning. Getting the recorder set up took longer than Jack had expected. The cable feed from the security camera vanished back into a wall a short distance from Gazen's office, and it took him and Draco several precious minutes to track it into the conference room next door. Once there, though, things went quicker. From the inside of a handy ventilation grill, Dracos dug a short tunnel into the soft material to the point where the cable ran through the wall. Wiring the recorder into the circuit, Jack stashed the device out of the way and resealed the grill.
You realize, of course, that this communication cable is one of the wires we punctured earlier,
Dracos pointed out. That's okay, Jack assured him, brushing the last bits of telltale dust from beneath the grill, trying to spread it evenly across the floor. They'll fix it as soon as they realize they're not getting a picture. Probably have it back up in an hour.
And then...
That camera has a perfect view of Gazen's keyboard, Jack said. We come back tomorrow and retrieve the recorder, and we ought to have a complete record of what it takes to get into the Chakuk family computer system. He felt a ripple across his skin as the dragon shook his head.
Sometimes you amaze me, Jack.
With my creativity?
With your sheer nerve,
Dracos corrected.
Who else would use an enemy's own security system against him?
Pretty much every thief worth his bail money, Jack said with a tight smile. That's how we do our job.
How you did your job,
Dracos corrected.
You are reformed now.
Right, Jack muttered. Sure couldn't prove it by me. He stood up, brushing the remaining dust off his hands as he surveyed the area. Not perfect, but good enough. Stepping to the door, he opened it a crack and peered out. He'd pushed his timing just a little too far. Across the big entry chamber, he could see muted lights and hear a quiet commotion coming from the kitchen. The breakfast crew, apparently, had started work.
The way to the stairwell is still clear if we hurry,
Dracos murmured in his ear. Jack swallowed. Let's go. Luck, or Kada warrior fortune, was with them. The slave activity was confined to the kitchen, and most of the residential area was still asleep. They ran across only one Brumga already on the move, and Dracos' ears caught his footsteps in time for Jack to duck out of sight behind a large decorative planter. 2 minutes later, they were back in her Thumbleness's room.
And now?
Dracos asked as Jack lay back down at the foot of the snoring Brumga's bed. We try to get some sleep, Jack said, stretching out on the hard floor and closing his eyes. I've got a feeling this is the most comfortable we're going to be for a while.